Hey everyone, thank you for joining us today. We are the co-founders of Natural Pregnancy and Birth, and my name's Atara. I'm really looking forward to this particular episode because today we're talking about breech birth, and who better to talk to about this than someone who has actually had a breech delivery. So Jillian, let's start from the very beginning. What kind of birth were you planning for?
Well, I, to be honest with you, the beginning of my pregnancy was a bit of a whirlwind. Um, I didn't know I was pregnant until after my first trimester was completely over. And for a number of reasons. And so when once I figured it out finally, at about 14 weeks, then like I was kind of just in this frantic like internet search of figuring out, where I wanted to give birth, trying to find a doctor. Where I was living at the time, I didn't have an OB or anything. I wasn't seeing anybody. And so first I had to figure out, what hospital do I want to give birth at? Because at that time, kind of in my journey, like I didn't even know much about anything like home birth or birth centers or anything like that. I didn't know of anybody that had given birth outside of a hospital. So my mind didn't even go there. My mind immediately just went to, okay, what hospital do I want to give birth at? Okay, found that. Now let's find an OB that's within that hospital system that's still accepting patients with my due date and that gets good reviews online and everything like that. So it all kind of started in just like this frenzy. And then after I had my OB and I had my first appointment and everything like that, that's when I kind of started to go down the rabbit hole of research. And at that point in my life, like I had kind of started to go the natural way with all things. But it really kind of presented mostly with my diet, with like cleaning supplies, with beauty products. And I didn't ever have to seek like natural solutions for health issues because I was healthy. I didn't have to go to the doctor. The only time I can remember is that like I had had irregular periods. So I went to go see a doctor about that, about my amenorrhea. Like I kind of knew that wasn't normal just to like regularly not get your period. But when I went to her, she said, oh, well, we can put you on birth control. And at the time I was just like, no, thank you. And walked away and didn't ever seek out like a more natural alternative to try and help my body get my periods back. And so that was kind of the extent of like my physical or like any kind of like medical care. And so, but as I started to do more and more research, I knew I wanted to have a natural birth. I didn't want to have a C-section and I didn't want to have an epidural. And so just like started kind of going down that rabbit hole of research. So the hospital that I decided to give birth at, they offered a hypnobirthing class actually. And so my husband and I took that class. And so that was kind of my strategy for having like a unmedicated vaginal birth, was to use these hypnobirthing techniques. So the hospital that I was at, they had that side of them that was supportive of like hypnobirth and of kind of a little bit more of the natural side of things. But on the other side, like they were a hospital, they also had that definite conventional side of things. So with my OB, things started well enough. But as my pregnancy progressed, there started to be a few red flags, I would say, that like she wasn't maybe the best fit for me. And I just remember one thing. Oh yeah, I was talking about my birth plan with her as kind of like I was progressing through the pregnancy, and I told her an intervention after birth that I didn't want to have. And her response to me was just kind of like, oh, and like, and I think that other women really like her because she was motherly, she kind of had that personality about her, but also because she was motherly, she also had this like mother knows best kind of attitude. And also, you know, when you didn't do things her way, she acted like you were disappointing her and trying, you know, as like maybe a mother would do, kind of a thing. And that's what I really felt in the moment. And I was just, I don't know. So that made me feel a little uncomfortable. So that was one red flag. And then also my daughter was measuring small. And we know now that she's just small. She's, to this day, is short for her age. And there are some short genes happening in the family. And, but she was measuring small. And because of that, I was told that I would be induced at 38 weeks. And, you know, at the time too, I just really honestly didn't understand. In my mind, logically, if she's small, let's give her more time to grow. And so I just honestly asked her, like, well, why do we do that? And her response was, because that's how it's done. And I was just like, okay, like I wasn't trying to like offend or anything. I just honestly, I like to understand my body and I like to understand things. That's why I do all this research and everything like that. So that was another red flag. I convinced her to kind of like push it to 39 weeks to be induced. And, but I honestly felt like at that point it was too late, you know, to switch or to do anything about it. And I also felt like too, like, okay, there's an end in sight. Once this baby is born, I don't have to like have her be my provider anymore at all. And so I just thought, you know, I'll just stick with it. I'm happy to just stand my ground and advocate for myself. And, you know, in a few weeks, this will all be over. And even though if she isn't like the perfect fit for me, like, you know, I'm so far along in my pregnancy right now that, you know, I didn't really feel like I had a choice. So I guess that is my long way of saying I wanted to have a natural birth. And from the beginning, I was planning on it, but also kind of having to fight for it even before we found out that she was breech. So,
Right. Well, you covered a lot, and you know, and this is for a whole different episode, but you brought up some really good points, care provider red flags, and how, you know, basically what I'm hearing is, you know, this is your pregnancy, but you, just the fact that women have to advocate for themselves. You know, if you want something done a certain way in your pregnancy, you have to fight really hard to get, to even be heard, you know, and to even get what it is that you want. So yeah, I'm glad that you brought those things up. That's a whole other
yeah.
But at what point during your pregnancy did you discover that your baby was breech?
I honestly don't remember. It was pretty early on because it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but like most babies start off breech and then they flip at some point. And so for a long time, I knew she was still in that position, but I also knew like, okay, there's time still, she'll flip. And so I just waited and waited and waited and didn't do anything because I was convinced, like in everything I read said she will flip. But as time went on, then I started to worry. And I knew I think it's like if you reach 36 weeks and this is your first pregnancy, you have a 1 in 8 chance of that baby flipping. If it's like your second, third, fourth, you have a 1 in 3 chance, you have a bit of a better chance of them flipping. But I started like that 36-week mark was approaching and she wasn't flipping and I was starting to get worried. So, so I guess at around maybe like 34 weeks is when I really started to be like, uh-oh, this might be something, this might become an issue. So yeah.
Right, gotcha. And what options were you presented with at that point?
I was presented with the option to have an ECV and then was told basically that if that doesn't work, then you need to have a C-section. That was it. And so I went ahead with the ECV and I think I looked it up now and the ECV has about a 50% success rate and it wasn't successful for me. And for anybody that doesn't know, an ECV is an external cephalad version where basically a doctor, you go in, and I've heard that in the States, you need to have an epidural to have it. I wasn't in the States at the time, so they gave me some drug to help just like relax everything. And it was just like this crazy feeling of just like felt my heart just like it was gonna pound out of my chest kind of a feeling. And then the doctor takes their hands and tries to physically manipulate the baby into the correct position, but she wasn't budging. And so after that was not successful, I was told that there were no other options. I could try the ECV again, maybe, if I wanted to. And then it was, a C-section. And so I was a little bit shocked that there was no other option, really. Just like how little choice that I even had in that manner. Like, because I was actually born vaginally as a breech vaginal birth from my mother. And so in my mind too, I was just like, well, I know this can be done. Why won't you just give me a chance? Kind of a thing. Like if it ends up being a C-section after you give me a chance to at least try, like, okay, great. And I didn't know much about it then and about the system and about, all that kind of stuff. But in my mind, it just didn't feel right at all based on everything that I had read about C-sections and just like what I intuitively felt about like the confidence in my body, in my baby, and in everything like that. It really didn't, it just didn't feel right at all, but I didn't have another option.
Right. And, well, first off, breech babies are so rare. And I believe it was up until the early 2000s that breech deliveries began to become like extinct. And so, providers, they just don't know how to participate in that process. And as a result, women have so few options, which is really unfortunate. So when you think about it, you're like, okay, well, if my only option is a C-section, that comes with really high risks as well.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the ECV, and you when I was doing research, I was looking up like some of the pros and cons of it, and you mentioned like your heart like was racing. Was that nervousness, or was it like just something that happened as a part of the process? Because I actually read that one of the risk factors with like an ECV is that the baby's heart rate could increase as well. So I thought that was really interesting that you mentioned like your heart.
My heart was definitely, that was whatever drug they gave me through the IV. Okay. But they did have her on monitors. Like you go into it knowing like, if something doesn't happen right with baby, if baby's heart rate starts to do something funky, then we need to deliver you right here, right now. And that's, one of the things that I was made aware of, but at the time I was willing to kind of like take that risk, to try and attempt the ECV. And you're right about too, since like the early thousands, because since having all this happen, I've learned a lot more about vaginal breech birth and just kind of how it's just this dying art. And I've heard that there was one study done in 2000 that basically showed just like a huge increase in risk for vaginal breech births. And that scared a lot of practitioners. And so they stopped doing them and they went to C-section only. And since then, there have been multiple studies that kind of show differing numbers in risks and stuff since that 2000 study, but that it hasn't been able to kind of like cut through the noise of that one study. And so, so practitioners stopped doing them. So they stopped teaching their students how to do them. And now, like I don't blame my practitioner anymore. She honestly didn't feel confident and comfortable enough to do that for me. And she didn't feel safe enough to do that. And so it's more like a system failure. And at the time, I didn't understand that. At the time, I thought, well, like, just let me try, because there are certain reasons that a baby can be in breech and that could present more risks. But I didn't have any of those reasons. Like if you have too little amniotic fluid, well, they were checking my fluids and those numbers were fine. If there are birth defects, if you have placenta previa, you know, I didn't have like any of those issues. So in my mind at the time, I was just like, you know, she's just in a weird position, just let me try. But then there was my practitioner, basically, I think just scared to let me try because she didn't want to fail me. So.
Right. Yeah. You know, like we were talking about, it's just, you mentioned a dying art. And it's true. It's not seen very much anymore. It's misunderstood, and it's inconvenient for providers as well. And, you know, as a result, you know, I believe it's like 90-something% of women who have breech babies, you know, they are automatically just have a C-section. You mentioned your option was an ECV. You tried that, baby wasn't feeling it.
Yeah.
She wanted to be born the way that she, you know, the way that she preferred. What other options or methods did you try to get baby to turn?
I tried everything. I was pretty desperate. So I tried the ECV, and then I also, you know, a lot of pregnant women know of the Spinning Babies website. And so, you know, they give exercises and positions for getting baby in optimal positioning for birth. And part of that is trying to get a breech baby to turn. So every night I was going upside down for 20 minutes, you know, off my couch. And I was doing all these kinds of like crazy positions and just like had this whole routine down to try and really just like make space for her to turn and stuff. So I did those every single night. At about 34 weeks, I started seeing an acupuncturist. And so I started weekly acupuncture as well as daily moxibustion. So moxibustion is, I was doing some research before this, and it looks like if you do it for 2 weeks, twice a day, between the weeks of 33 and 35 weeks, and I was at 34 weeks, it'll work for 1 in 8 women. And so what it is you basically are given this like charcoal stick kind of a thing, and you light it, so then it's like a burning ember, and you hold it close to your pinky toe, which activates with heat like an acupressure point, and that's supposed to encourage baby to turn. And so I did that twice a day, every day. And like when you're that pregnant, you can't reach your toes that well. So then there was my husband holding this thing up against my pinky toe and me telling him, nope, a little closer. No, that's burning a little bit further away. And it's just like, so I had this routine of going upside down every single night with the Spinning Babies website, and this routine of like lighting this charcoal stick against my toe every single day. And so like looking back, it's kind of funny, but I tried everything. And then also at like 34, 35 weeks, I started seeing a chiropractor that specialized in Webster technique, which is a technique especially used for like pregnant women, to try and see if maybe realigning anything inside of me could help to give her the space to turn. And also, since I was doing hypnobirthing, there was a special hypnobirthing track that I could purchase that's specifically for flipping a breech baby and encouraging using hypnotherapy to encourage the baby to flip. So I tried it all and none of it worked. And I don't know if it was just too little too late, or if she just really wanted to be born breech and that's who she is. And so yeah, I tried everything that the internet told me could possibly work. So.
Well, even though it didn't work for you, it's good that you went over some of these methods that you tried, because you know, we probably have viewers that have breech pregnancies, and maybe it'll be successful for
Yes.
some of them. And another thing that you mentioned, that you were born breech. So it's interesting, you know, that your baby chose, you know, this position as well. So it's just a variation of normal. And yeah, so I thought that was interesting that you were also born that way. Were your care providers supportive of your decision to proceed with a vaginal breech delivery?
Well, Yeah. My acupuncturist and my chiropractor, they were, and actually seeing them was like this big eye-opening experience for me, because like I said before, like I was into kind of like natural kind of way of doing things, but I didn't need to seek medical attention. And so then seeing them and talking to them, like I was like, wow, they listen to me. Wow, they take the time to explain things to me. They tell me why they do things. And like they were able to explain things not only about why they were doing things, but why my OB was maybe telling me certain things that she didn't explain to me herself. But they said, oh, yeah, well, if you look at this number and if you look at this, this is why she's saying that. And like it was just so refreshing. But then also at the same time, like showed me such that there was such a stark difference between them and her, and I was just like, this is how it can be, really. And so that also kind of yeah, gave me like just more of a push to do something about it, because like I said, I was only given the option of a C-section with her. So she was not supportive at all of a vaginal breech birth. Like I said before, like I just think she really didn't feel comfortable doing that. And it just wasn't even an option. So then it was at that point that I started again, scouring the internet frantically, trying to find a practitioner that would support me in this. And I found the one practitioner in the entire city. And I was living in Melbourne, Australia. It's a big city. It's a big metropolitan city. And I found the one through online forums and stuff like that, that would support me in this birth. And his nickname in the forums was Vaginal Lionel, because he specializes in high risk vaginal pregnancies, multiples, VBAC, and in breech birth. And luckily, like I met him for the first time when I was like 38 weeks and some days, maybe 4 or 5 days. And it was really late. And so like, luckily he was willing to take me on and to meet with me. And when I met with him, like he was a straight shooter. He was not motherly in the least bit. But at that point, that is not what I wanted. He gave me the facts. He said, here are the risks. Here are the numbers. You are the mother. This is your baby. You make the choice. And that to me was so refreshing, because he was treating me like a human being. He was treating me like an intelligent adult and not like a child, and just like really making me a partner in this. And that's what I felt from him. And that's what I felt from my acupuncturist and from my chiropractor. Like, all right, I got this team around me now. So yeah, I switched my OBs at like 38 weeks and 4 or 5 days, something like that. So after I switched to him, then yes, I was supported, but I really had to seek out that support.
Right. You mentioned that it was more of a partnership, and going back to your previous OB, I know you were giving her some grace, but it's just one of those things where, a lot of women feel as though they're not being heard, they're not being listened to, and I think that it's really important to reframe the whole pregnancy birth thing, because as the expectant woman, you are the authority of your body. You're just looking for someone who's going to support you in the process. And fortunately, you were able to find that with the person that you went ahead and switched to. But there really shouldn't be like this hierarchy of power, like where you're like fighting. It's like this tug of war sort of thing. It's like, this is what I want. Tell me, what are the risks, and, things like that. And then I can make an informed decision, and which is your decision to make. So it's awesome that you were able to find someone willing to work with you, and you were able to make that switch. So tell us about your birth experience.
Well, like I said, I met him very late on in my pregnancy. And so we met on a Monday. Um, and then he said, okay, go home and think about this. You know, I'm not going to have you sign on with me today. So I met with him on a Monday. I signed the paperwork with him on the next day on Tuesday, and Wednesday evening I went into labor. And then Thursday morning she was born. And I think part of it too was just like, once I signed on with him, my body just did this big, like, overall just sigh of relief. And I was like, okay, I can do this now. And then she just like came like that. And so my water, I was just like getting ready to do like a little bit of yoga before making dinner that Wednesday evening, and my water broke. And I was a little bit in denial, I think, because first of all, you know, they say, you know, you read everything and they say, oh, it's not like the movies. It's not like you're just going to be going about your day and all of a sudden all this water comes gushing out in this dramatic fashion. I'm like, well, that's what happened for me. And I didn't even believe it at first. I was like, did I just pee myself? You know, you're that far pregnant. I had my husband like get down on his hands and knees and do a sniff test on it. And like, he was just like, no, this is not urine, you know, kind of a thing. So like I was a little bit in denial because of that. And then also, you know, everything you read says, well, with your first, you know, you're not going to come early. You're going to go past your due date. And I was at 38 weeks and 6 days, you know. So anyway, so after that, after I realized like, okay, no, this is actually happening right now. We called the hospital and they said, okay, well, come on in and we'll check you. But then, you know, you'll go home to labor and then come back later, kind of a thing. But when I got there, due to the fact that she was breech and the fact that she was small, they wanted to keep me there to monitor me, but we hadn't brought anything with us. So my husband had to run home and pack the bags. And there was drama with that too, because like I had, you know, I was very organized. I had a whole list and I said, okay, the bolded items on this list are the things that still need to be packed. And he's like in there trying to find all the non-bolded items. And like, I think he's just in his frazzled state. And so eventually I was like, just get back here. So for his own suitcase, he just throws a bunch of stuff in and he looked like he was packed for like a month-long vacation. But anyway, we laugh about that a lot right now. But all that being aside, then labor actually went really well. I was doing my hypnobirthing stuff and, you know, I was pretty much left on my own in a good way. You know, I had dimmed lights, they were quiet, they would come in and check. And I did have to have monitors on, but they were wireless, so I could move around. And so just sometimes they would have to come and reposition them, but it wasn't really ever like, I didn't feel like they were intruding or anything like that. And I wasn't able to go in water because of it, but I didn't ever feel the desire to anyway. So that wasn't a big deal for me. And just for the most part, I was kind of just like in this like other zone of reality. And like, I don't honestly even remember, I don't think they checked my dilation. If they did, I don't have a memory of it. And they didn't tell me numbers. They just kind of let me do my thing in a good way. But then as the time was getting closer and I started feeling the urge to push, I remember telling the midwife, like, you know, I'm starting to feel like it's coming time. I kind of feel like I need to push. And she just kept saying, oh, not yet, not yet, not yet. And then all of a sudden, you know, after a while of that, then in come the doctor, in come the nurses, in come the pediatrician, and they're like, all right, it's time. Like, you know, now that we say so, now it's time, you know, kind of a thing. And I was like, flipped on my back, my feet were put up in stirrups and everything. And at the time, I was like a little bit in shock. Like I didn't know they were going to do that. But at the same time, I kind of like had the mindset too of like, wow, this isn't what I expected, but I was still so grateful to be giving birth vaginally and to not be in a C-section that I was like, you know what, this is what I got to do, whatever. And also like I had been laboring through the night. I was just like, I was exhausted. Like, okay, this is what I got to do to get through this final stage. This is what I'm going to do. Kind of a thing. And then same thing, like the nurses started coaching me on like breathing and telling me to scream and not hold my breath, and like intuitively, like that's not what my body wanted to do. But even at the time, I was just like, fine, I'll just do it if you'll just stop, if you'll just shut up, like stop telling me to do it. So some of those things were like kind of strange and unexpected, but the same thing, like I was just willing to do it because I didn't care, because I was so grateful to just kind of like be having this vaginal birth. And, I have no clue like how long I pushed or anything. It wasn't long. And I don't know, the only memory I really have of that whole thing of like her, the doctor telling me to like reach down and feel, and I could like, instead of feeling a head, I felt a toe, like a foot with like all the little toes and stuff, which was made it like really real and in the moment. And so everything, yeah, went well. She was delivered. I was able to have my like skin to skin and, everything like that. And there was a pediatrician there to check on her, because a big issue or a big concern with breech babies is like what's going on with their hips. And I honestly forget why the hips are a concern, but the pediatrician was there to check on her hips. And then I had to go back a few weeks later to have her hips checked again. But after that, everything was, yeah, pretty good. So
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. I'm really glad that it turned out so well for you, and you're in that, like, your baby is in that 3 to 4% of breech babies that are born, so it's rare, but I'm really glad that everything turned out so well for you. And what advice would you give to mothers who are pregnant with breech babies and are worried about, like, maybe they want to seek out other options, or
yeah. Well, first and foremost is just like follow your mommy instincts. If your instincts and your intuition are telling you that a C-section isn't right for you, and that your baby and you are going to be okay if you have a vaginal birth, then go with that. But if your intuition is telling you you'd be better off with a C-section, then go with that, kind of a thing. I just like feel like I had this like internal knowing of like, this isn't right for me with the C-section. So that goes with any birth, whether it's, a breech birth or anything like that. I think a woman's intuition is so strong during pregnancy, and you just need to learn to trust it. And then, but more practically speaking, I would say start sooner. Don't just wait for baby to turn. It's never too early to start doing like the spinning babies exercises and everything like that. And so I'm pregnant right now, and this time around, I started doing spinning babies exercises probably at the beginning of my 3rd trimester, I think, and just started making that part of my daily routine. I started seeing a chiropractor at 20 weeks, and I knew too that if this were becoming an issue, that I would start an acupuncturist sooner. I would start, just like doing these things and being a little bit more proactive about it, because I was just convinced all this time, like, oh, well, she'll flip. And she didn't. And it's not like a regret I have, because everything turned out all right. But, and, I still don't even know if she would have flipped. But for anybody like that thinks that that might be going that way, just doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt to go see a chiropractor. It doesn't hurt to start doing some of these spinning babies exercises and everything like that. And then the final thing too has nothing to do with like breech, but it's never too late to switch, and you don't need to worry about hurting your practitioner's feelings. You hired them, you can fire them, and there's always another option, whether it's you're not vibing with them because of certain interventions they want, or because it's a personality clash. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, this is your birth, this is your baby, and like, it's never too late to switch and to change your mind, and it's okay. Like, just do it and you'll be happier in the end. Yeah.
that is wonderful advice. And finally, Jillian, you mentioned that you are expecting, and your estimated due date is like
In 2 weeks.
in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So is this baby breech? Is Is she head first?
She is, yeah, she's head down.
Okay.
She is ready to go. And I mean, who knows if that has to do with me being proactive about it, or if this is just a different baby that wants to be born a different way. But yeah, she's ready to go. I'm ready to go. We're both just waiting at this point. So
Well, thank you for sharing all of that with us. And I hope that our audience was able to um, get some good information from your sharing. And we're wishing you really well with your upcoming delivery. It's really exciting. And I just want to thank everyone for joining us and tuning in. Feel free to subscribe to our email newsletter. We are doing lots of interviews. We are sharing lots of blogs. So definitely sign up for that and get, and get insider information for those things. So thank you, Jillian, so much. And thank you to our audience. And we'll see you next time.
bye.